Cabillan, Rosales, and Seno. Okay, close plaza, go.
So, good afternoon, everyone. So, I will be reporting for the closed plaza. So to recall what we learned in the previous lesson about the public square or plaza, Motin stated that a plaza is one of the most vital elements of a city's design, and it also serves as a scene that sets the public and commercial buildings. And there are two main methods of categorizing plazas, which is the by form and by function. And as what we've discussed, plazas can function as centers or gathering spaces and can also function as portals where it serves as a point of departure. And now we go to the form of the square. So according to Camille's site, there are two categories of square in formal terms, which is distinguished as deep and wide type. And as for Paul Zucker, you can see this also in our notes in Canva. He distinguished five forms of plaza, naming the closed square, the dominated square, the nuclear square, group square, and lastly the amorphous square, which will all be discussed by our class today. And for our group's discussion, we will be focusing on the closed plaza, and by which Zucker pretends to as a, a self-contained space. And together with the dominated plaza, both of these falls under what Camilo site said, what Camilo site classified as deep and wide type. Or in simple terms, we can say this as enclosed plazas. So what is closed plaza and how can we differentiate it from a dominated plaza? So the closed plaza is the basic plaza system, and it is characterized by a sense of enclosure. So according to Moten, one key factor in establishing a sense of enclosure is the treatment of corners. So basically what he is saying is that the more open the corners are the lesser the sense of enclosure. So if I go to our examples here, our first example is the Piazza della Santissima in Florence, Italy. So this is an intimate rectangular space, and in its plan, it has one major entrance here and three minor exits. So basically you can see that the corners are open, but according to Motin, um, these outlets are narrow and the buildings are still visually linked together. And you can see here that the main entrance, as what we've discussed previously in our classes, that this axis here uh, links the basilica and the statue of for the Grand Duke Ferdinand. So this is also one of the purpose of the plaza to also link the basilica to the gathering space for the people. And um, for our second example, which is the Plaza Mayor in Salamanca, Spain. So this is actually the most, I think for me, this is the most ideal example for the corners quality in which Moten stated, because the corners here are more treated and close, and in the plan or in the aerial view, you can see that the streets doesn't continue to the plaza because the opening is only limited to the ground, and there is a large massive building that sits in its upper part. So it's still more like it still gives an illusion that the building is continuous.
Mm. Yes.
And he also stated, Motin also stated other qualities that affect the degree of enclosure, which is the first, the enclosing buildings. So he referred to the plazas as an outdoor intimate room where the enclosing buildings are the walls. And just like an indoor room, the sky serves as a ceiling. So I should go to the Plaza Mayor. So since the sky serves as this ceiling, the closed plaza is defined by the enclosing buildings. And Motin also stated that these buildings should be as two-dimensional as possible, because we all know that the walls of a room are planes which are two-dimensional. So it somewhat it is somewhat analogous. The buildings of the plaza is somewhat analogous to the walls of a room. And
Yes.
the
Continue.
the third the second element is the roof line. So as what Moten mentioned, that the sky is a flat ceiling of the plaza, he said that in order for it to sit securely, just like how we imagined ourselves in a room having a ceiling, the roof line should be more or less of equal height throughout its length. So its roof line can be analogous to a cornice of a room. And I'm sure all of you are familiar with the cornice of a room. And obviously, we don't want to have that much variations in the levels of a cornice of the room, and because it would look messy. So Moten explained that the roof line, as much as possible, should be aligned or are within the same level of magnitude of variations. So by this, he stated that the enclosure progressively diminish if the variations in the height increase. So I would like to highlight our third example, which is um, the Piazza del Campo. So you can see here variations in the height. So this means that there are different roof lines, but the key here is that the variation is on the same magnitude as what Moted stated. So it somewhat doesn't the variation these are there are still lesser variations, so it would still not violate the quality of having a aligned roof line to in order to promote a an enclosure for the space. And um the the third one is the height of the enclosing buildings. So basically this is somewhat same with the roof line, but this focuses more in the relation to the size of the space. So um it's stated here the design guide prepared by the Essex County Council states and suggests that the maximum harmonious proportion of the height of the buildings to the width of the space is 1:4. And so if the height of the building is too high in relation to the width, it would give the person a feeling of oppression. And if the height of the building is too low, it may give a feeling of exposure and vulnerability. So, Alberti also stated that a proper height should be about one third of the width, or at least one sixth. So, going to the proportions of this Piazza della Santissima, which is 1:3.3 and 1:5.4. And lastly, in the direction of the cathedral, it is 1:3.8. So it still fits the ideal proportions according to Alberti, although this 1:5.4 is close to 1:6. And for the next one is the degree of the building's three-dimensional model line. So Motin said that the closer the walls of the square resembles the two-dimensional quality in the internal room, the greater will be the feeling of enclosure. So the more 3D looking the buildings are, the lesser the sense of enclosure. So since what I mentioned earlier, it should be analogous to the walls of a room, and we all know that the walls are planes or two-dimensional. He also Motin also gave an example that if the sides of the space were buildings standing in isolation, people see it as sculptures or 3D pieces, therefore the enclosure is lost. So another thing that I would like to highlight in our example is this one. So you can see here that the walls give an illusion of two-dimensional planes. And in this opening, you can see that the illusion is lost because you can already see the side of the other side of the plane, and also there's a shadow. So it gives it reveals the 3D form of the building, which in which the plane is lost. And The next one is the presence and absence of a unifying architectural theme. So according to Motin, the buildings should also form a continuous surface and present an architectural unity. And he calls this as an effect of continuity. And one way to achieve this is through the repetition of elements like the colonnade or arcade. You can see here in the Piazza della Santissima, the arcades. And um, this does not only link the ground floors of the buildings, but also reduce the difference in terms of mass. And this feature was frequently used by the Spanish town plazas as a unifying element. So for Moten, in Piazza della Santissima, this is the key element that holds the space together. And with the use of columns and arc, it links the building from all sides together, which creates a rhythm and unity. And you can also see here that in the corner, you can see here that since the corners are open, it still has an arc element, which gives an illusion that the arcade of this building is continuing to this street. And for the last, which is the overall shape of the space, um, so Motin stated that the ideal form for a closed square is a simple geometric volume built from a square, rectangle or a circular ground plan. So for this example, you can see that the dimensions of this Piazza della Santissima is almost close to a square, which is 16-meter by 75 meters. And also for the Plaza Mayor in Salamanca, Spain, it is still close to square, and it still is a basic geometrical shape, and also for the Piazza del Campo. So that would be all. Thank you.
Okay, good. Just within 2 minutes. Nice. I'll have more comments on this, but since we're a bit short on time, they also asked me to attend a meeting at 3 p.m., so that's why I'm rushing everyone. Okay, very good. Next group, please. This is, I'll stop recording here just so we easier to upload.